A sudden, sharp clarity hits the back of my throat, tasting of ice crystals and pine needles long before I even see a tree. It is the specific, silent weight of Arctic air, pressing against the open door of the aircraft, waiting to rush in and claim the warmth we brought with us. Stepping across the threshold, the metal floor of the jet bridge hums beneath my boots, vibrating with a low, steady frequency that travels up through my soles. The transition from the pressurized cabin to this northern atmosphere is not harsh, but enveloping. It feels as though the world has suddenly become larger, quieter, and vastly more still. The corridor stretches out ahead, bathed in soft, artificial light that buzzes at the very edge of hearing. My movements are heavy, slowed by the thick layers of wool and down I put on before landing. Every step creates a dull, muffled thud against the industrial carpeting, a rhythm that syncs with the slow, deliberate beating of my heart. The air here is still conditioned, yet it carries a hint of what lies outside, a faint scent of ozone and deep, frozen earth. Walls of glass offer a view of the tarmac, but the glass is thick and layered, turning the scene outside into a silent film. Ground crews move in slow motion, their breath-forming clouds that linger in the air. I turn away from the window and continue the long walk toward the terminal. The carpet gives way to polished stone, and the acoustic shift is immediate. The muffled thud turns into a crisp, echoing click. Clicky, clicky, clicky. The sound of my boots on the terrazzo floor is sharp and defined. It is the only sound in the hallway for a long time. I reach the baggage claim, a cavernous space where voices drift up to the high ceiling and vanish into the rafters. The belt begins to move. It is a hypnotic loop of black rubber plates sliding over metal rollers. A low drone fills the air, a mechanical hum that feels like a lullaby. I watch the empty belt circle once, then twice. When my bag arrives, I lift it. The handle is cool and smooth against my palm. The weight pulls at my shoulder, a grounding sensation that reminds me of gravity. I extend the telescopic handle. It locks with a satisfying metallic snap. Now the rhythm changes again. The rolling wheels introduce a continuous, low rumble against the stone floor. It is a steady, grinding harmony that accompanies me toward the exit. Passing through the sliding glass doors, they part with a whisper of hydraulics. The air inside the arrival hall is warmer, smelling of coffee and damp coats. I move through the space without rushing. There is no urgency here. The wheels of my suitcase transition from the smooth stone to a textured rubber mat near the exit. The rumble lowers in pitch, becoming a soft vibration that travels up the handle and into my hand. I push the heavy door open and step out into the Finnish night. The silence of Rovaniemi is not an absence of sound, but a presence of snow. It acts as a dampener, absorbing the noise of engines and footsteps, leaving only a soft, cushioned stillness. I find the transport waiting near the curb. The vehicle is warm, a capsule of heat against the freezing dark. My bag slides into the trunk with a heavy thud. I settle into the seat, the fabric rough and sturdy against my coat. As we pull away, the airport lights fade into the distance, replaced by the endless, towering shadows of the pine forest. Streetlights cast pools of orange glow upon the road, illuminating the banks of snow that stand as tall as walls on either side. We move through the darkness, the tires humming over packed ice. It is a consistent, soothing white noise. I watch the trees pass by. They are heavy with snow, their branches bowing low in a gesture of slumber. The journey ends at a small wooden lodge on the edge of the town. The key turns in the lock with a smooth, oiled resistance. Inside, the room is small and wood-paneled, smelling of timber and unscented soap. I leave the heavy bag by the door, listening to the finality of the latch clicking shut. Layer by layer, the heavy winter gear comes off. The thick coat, the scarf, the boots. I place them quietly in the wardrobe. The room is heated to a perfect, drowsy temperature. I move to the bed. The linens are stark white, pulled tight across the mattress. I sit on the edge, feeling the bed give way slowly beneath me. I swing my legs up, the fatigue of the journey finally catching up to my limbs. My head finds the pillow. It is cool against my cheek, smelling of fresh laundry and winter air. I pull the duvet up to my chin, letting the weight of the blankets settle over me like a cloud. The air here holds a density that defies the thermometer. It is not merely cold, but substantial. A heavy curtain of frost that settles against the skin with a gentle, persistent weight. High on the slopes of Unisvara, the world has been reduced to two primary tones. There is the deep, bruised green of the pine needles, where the wind has shaken them free. And there is the white, an endless, rolling ocean of snow that swallows sound and softens every edge. My boots find purchase on the winter trail. The path is a ribbon of packed ice and powder, winding between trees that have lost their individual shapes. They are statues now, bowed under the burden of Tikkalumi, that heavy crown of hard snow that transforms spruces into silent, slumbering giants. I move through this gallery of white sculptures, the only sound the rhythmic crunch of rubber soles biting into the frost. Ahead, the timber frame of a lean-to emerges from the monochrome forest. The logs are silver gray, aged by seasons of midnight sun and polar night. I do not linger at the shelter itself, for the map in my mind marks a specific radius. I turn my back to the opening of the lean-to and begin to count. 1 step, 2 steps. The snow off the beaten path is deeper here. resisting the forward motion of my shins. I am looking for the Unisvara spring. The lore says it waits exactly 100 meters from the shelter. My breath plumes out in rhythmic clouds, vanishing into the gray sky. At the 50th step, the silence seems to deepen. At the 80th step, the terrain dips slightly. And then, at the count of 100, the unbroken white sheet of the forest floor is interrupted. A small pool of dark, glassy water sits open to the sky. It does not freeze. The earth's own warmth keeps a perfect circle liquid, while the rest of the world is locked in ice. I crouch near the edge. There is no steam, only a stillness so absolute it feels ancient. The water is clear enough to see the brown stones at the bottom, untouched by the frost that coats the moss on the banks. I watch the surface for a long time, waiting for a ripple that never comes. Rising from the spring, I turn toward the descent. The path widens, leading down from the fell toward the river valley. This is where the world simplifies further, where the destination fades and only the motion remains. I settle into the cadence of the walk. There is no need to navigate here, only to place one foot in front of the other. The rhythm becomes a physical mantra. Left boot, right boot. The sound of the snow changing pitch with the subtle variations in temperature. Sometimes it is a dull thud, soft and powdery. Sometimes it is a sharp squeak, high and dry, indicating a patch of harder ice beneath the surface. The movement warms the muscles in my thighs and calves. My arms swing in a steady pendulum arc, brushing against the sides of my jacket with a soft, swishing sound that marks the tempo. Swish, step, crunch. Swish, step, crunch. The trees on either side are a blur of vertical lines, passing by like the ticking of a slow clock. I do not look at them individually. They are a collective presence, a wall of gray and white that guides me downward without demand. My breathing aligns with my stride. In for 3 steps, out for 3 steps. The cold air enters sharp and clean, waking the senses in the chest, then leaves warm and humid. There is nothing to solve here. There is no puzzle in the path. It is just the friction of the soul against the ground and the transfer of weight. The horizon is hidden behind the canopy, removing the concept of distance. Time is measured only in these repetitions, in the steady, unthinking progress of the body moving through the winter air. Minutes stretch out, uncounted and unhurried. The mind empties, leaving only the sensation of gravity and the white noise of the wind high in the treetops. Gradually, the incline levels out. The trees part. The enclosed feeling of the forest gives way to the vast, flat expanse of the frozen river. I have reached the edge of the Arcticum Arboretum. The light has shifted. The gray afternoon is deepening into the blue hour. That specific Arctic twilight where the snow glows with a faint, electric indigo. I walk along the shoreline, the ice of the river thick enough to hold the weight of the city. Though I stay on the bank, my eyes scan the shapes in the distance, looking for the island that breaks the flat surface of the frozen water. I am seeking the remnants of the Vickman sawmill. It is not a grand monument, but a memory in stone. I cross a small wooden bridge, the planks frosted over, and step onto the island. The ruins appear as geometric interruptions in the natural flow of the snowdrifts. Blocks of concrete, weathered and chipped, rise from the ground like sturdy islands in a sea of white. They are the bones of industry, long since quieted. I approach the largest foundation. The concrete is rough under my gloved hand, holding a chill distinct from the air. Snow has capped every flat surface, rounding the sharp corners of the ruins. I circle the perimeter of the old mill site. There is a profound stillness here, different from the forest. It is the stillness of a place that once held noise and fire, and is now returned to the ice. I find a low wall, brushed clean by the wind, and rest against it. The river stretches out before me, a vast white highway leading nowhere. The blue light intensifies, turning the concrete walls into dark silhouettes against the glowing snow. I watch the color of the sky shift by degrees, a slow fade from gray to deep azure, letting the silence of the river settle over the ruins. Morning arrives not as a sudden burst of sun, but as a slow, deliberate shifting of the spectrum. The heavy gray of the night lifts, just enough to reveal a world bathed in deep indigo and pale violet. Here at the Vikakernges start point, the air is not merely cold. It is a solid, static presence that presses against the layers of my thermal clothing. Every inhale feels crisp, filtering through my scarf before reaching my lungs. The shore trail stretches out ahead, a narrow ribbon of packed white winding through a landscape that has been sleeping for months. The snow is deep here, piling high upon the rocks and turning the forest floor into a rolling sea of soft, white dunes. I ease onto the path. The sound of my boots meeting the snow is the only disruption in the silence. It is a dry, high-pitched crunch, the sound of crystals compressing under weight. To my left, the river Rovaniemi is a study in contrasts. Where the current is slow, the water is hidden beneath thick, flat sheets of ice, dusted with snow. But where the rapids churn, the black water fights its way to the surface, steaming in the freezing air. The mist rises in lazy spirals, coating the overhanging branches in delicate needles of hoarfrost. The forest thickens. Young birches bend under their winter burdens, forming arches that I must duck beneath. But I am looking for something older. I am looking for the sentinel that has watched this river for centuries. Ahead, the texture of the forest changes. The slender, pale trunks give way to a massive, dark column, rising straight toward the canopy. This is the ancient pine. 450 years of history stand rooted in the frozen earth. I drift closer, removing a glove to let my hand hover near the bark, though I do not touch it. The surface is rugged and deeply fissured. It resembles the armored hide of a crocodile. Plates of reddish-brown bark separated by dark, vertical canyons. This tree was a sapling before maps of this region were drawn. It has survived storms, fires, and the endless cycle of the freeze. The bark is thick, a shield against the biting wind. High above, the twisted branches hold a heavy canopy of green needles, dark against the white sky, motionless and patient. Leaving the ancient pine, the trail descends toward the suspension bridge. The structure hangs across the river, a span of steel and wood connecting the snowy banks. I step onto the wooden slats. The bridge sways gently, a subtle reminder of the forces at play. I pause in the center, suspending my movement to listen. In this extreme temperature, the world sounds different. The steel cables that hold the bridge aloft are contracting in the cold. It is a sound on the edge of perception, a faint metallic singing. Occasionally, there is a sharp pop, a release of tension that echoes flatly against the ice below. The metal is reacting to the air, tightening, adjusting, singing its own high, lonely song to the rushing water beneath. The path continues on the far bank, leading away from the river and into the deep woods. Here, the sensory input simplifies. There is only the corridor of trees and the rhythm of the march. I settle into a steady cadence. Left boot, right boot. The snow is firmer here, packed down by the wind, allowing for a consistent pace. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. My breath creates a small, personal cloud that appears and vanishes with every exhale. In and out. The cold touches the only exposed skin on my face, the bridge of my nose, and the tops of my cheeks. But the sensation is distant, separate from the warmth of my core. The trees on either side are identical sentinels, wrapped in white. There are no landmarks here, no signs, only the white track leading forward. My arms swing slightly at my sides, the fabric of my parka creating a soft, swishing whisper that blends with the crunch of the snow. One step, then another. The mind empties of thoughts and plans, replaced entirely by the mechanics of motion. There is the lift of the leg, the placement of the heel, the roll of the foot, and the push off the toe. It is a cycle that requires no attention, yet occupies the entire consciousness. The visual world is a blur of vertical lines and white expanse. The horizon is hidden by the forest, keeping the focus entirely on the 10 feet of trail immediately ahead. Time seems to stretch and thin. 10 minutes feel like an hour. An hour feels like a single moment. The repetition is a comfort. It It is a lullaby of movement. The heart beats a slow, steady drum against the ribs. The lungs fill with the clean, sharp air, expanding and contracting. There is no destination in this moment, only the act of going. The body generates its own heat, a small furnace moving through the frozen landscape. The repetition smooths out the edges of the day, leaving only the pure, simple experience of being a moving object in a still world. Gradually, the density of the trees begins to open. I slow my pace, letting the momentum fade until I am standing still once more. The heavy breathing slows, returning to a quiet rhythm. The light has shifted again. The pale violet of the morning has deepened into the blue hour of the afternoon, the time when the snow seems to glow from within. I find a large, flat rock swept clear of snow by the wind and brush away the remaining powder. I sit. The forest settles around me. The silence rushes back in to fill the space where my footsteps had been. It is not an empty silence, but a heavy, resting one. The day is not ending, but simply pausing, holding its breath in the blue twilight. The cold is no longer an intruder. It is just the state of the world, vast and enduring. I watch a single snowflake detach from a branch above and drift downward, rocking gently on the air, taking a long time to find its place on the ground. The elevation of Santavara begins not with a steep climb, but with a gradual thickening of the snow. The road left behind is a flat gray line, vanishing into the lower fog, while the path ahead is a pristine, unwritten page of white. Here, the spruce trees have ceased to look like trees. They have transformed into tiki, heavy sculptures of hard rime and accumulated snowfall, bent into arches and rounded pyramids that crowd the trail. My boots sink into the packed powder. The sound is a dull, satisfying compaction, like pressing a thumb into fresh dough. The air here is sharper than in the valley, carrying the metallic scent of deep freeze and pine needles buried meters deep. A fine mist hangs between the white shapes, softening the edges of the world until distance becomes difficult to judge. I move deeper into the silent gallery. The rhythm of the ascent takes over. Lift, step, sink. The movement becomes the only clock that matters. The incline is gentle but persistent, demanding a steady cadence. With every stride, the crust of the snow breaks with a soft, dry snap, followed immediately by the hushed slide of synthetic fabric against the drift. My breath forms small, temporary clouds that drift backward over my shoulder, dissolving into the gray sky. There is no wind in this corridor of white. The silence is absolute, a heavy velvet blanket that absorbs the noise of the forest. Occasionally, a branch higher up the slope releases a handful of powder, which cascades down through the limbs with a sound like pouring sugar. But otherwise, the world is still. I place one foot forward, testing the weight, then follow with the other. The motion is hypnotic. My gaze rests on the patch of snow 3 feet ahead, watching the texture of the ice crystals sparkle briefly before being crushed under the sole of the boot. Lift, step, sink. The repetition clears the mind. There is no destination in this moment, only the act of climbing. The cold presses against the exposed skin of my face, a firm and constant reminder of the latitude. But the heat of exertion balances it. The path winds slightly to the left, then corrects to the right. Yet the scenery remains a constant tunnel of bowed white forms. Time stretches out, measured not in minutes, but in the number of breaths taken, in the number of steps laid into the hill. The solitude is dense, filling the space between the trees, turning the forest into a singular, sleeping entity. Eventually, the terrain levels out near the summit ridge. The trees here are spaced wider apart, allowing the faint, pearlescent light of the afternoon to filter through. I slow my pace, letting the rhythm of the climb fade into a standing stillness. To my right, a massive form dominates the clearing. It is the snow guardian I sought. It must be an ancient spruce, perhaps 20 feet tall, but the tree itself is entirely hidden. Layers of frost and storm-driven snow have encased it in a smooth, undulating armor. It leans slightly, appearing like a robed figure with its head bowed against a gale that is not currently blowing. The surface of the sculpture is not smooth, but textured like rough plaster, pitted by the wind. I do not touch it. To touch, it would be to disturb a balance held for months. I simply breathe in its presence, watching how the gray light clings to its curves. The descent happens in a blur of deepening blue. The white hill recedes, and the layers of the atmosphere shift from the crisp isolation of the ridge to the humid, heavier air of the river valley. By the time the city grid emerges, the sky has turned the color of bruised indigo. The Yetkinkintale Bridge rises ahead, its twin pylons glowing with a warm, sodium yellow light at the top, resembling the flickering flames of lumberjack candles. I drift onto the pedestrian walkway. The river Kemijoki lies below, a vast, frozen expanse that looks more like a plain of white desert than a body of water. The metal railing is coated in a thin skin of frost. I lean forward, looking down past the steel girders to the ice far below. The yellow light from the pylons casts long, distorted shadows across the river surface, revealing the topography of the freeze. Near the center of the channel, the ice tells a story of movement arrested in an instant. The wind and the current fought here before the cold one. I trace the lines of a frozen vortex, a spiral of jagged ridges and smooth, dark pools of clear ice where the water swirled and locked. It looks like a galaxy trapped in glass. pattern is intricate, a chaotic swirl caught and held perfectly still. The vibration of a passing car hums through the deck of the bridge, traveling up through the soles of my boots, a low tremor that fades as quickly as it arrived. Below, the frozen vortex remains static, catching the reflection of a street lamp and holding it deep within its dark center. The cold rising from the river is different now, damp and heavy, smelling of deep water and snowmelt waiting for spring. I let my eyes unfocus, merging the yellow lights and the blue ice into a single, shimmering field of color. The city sounds are distant, muffled by the vast, open space of the river, leaving only the hum of the wind through the cables.